Welcome back to the channel. This will be the best midfielders in Fantasy Premier League ahead of the new season, and there are some positional changes which I covered in my key changes to FPL podcast, but you can see them in this graphic. Matheus Cunha is one of the standout kind of classifications or reclassifications from a forward to a midfielder, and he's not the only one. You've got Cody Gakpo, who scored in Liverpool's 4-2 defeat against AC Milan, and plenty of defenders going into a midfielder and vice versa. So Ryan Sessegnon is one prime example there, but the likes of Lewis Skelly, Rodrigo Gomez and Lewis Potter were midfielders last season and are now be reclassified to a defender. Even Ndai, who was quite a popular choice, I think FPL.team and other websites predicted that sort of positional change, and there are plenty more that came from. Marmoush was a pleasant surprise, so to speak, from a forward to a midfielder, and Jeroboam was probably the most controversial of the lot. He was always a midfielder in FPL, but now he's going to be a forward in the upcoming season. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. What do you think of these reclassifications, and which players are you most interested in? And in terms of the best midfielders, how would you rank them in terms of the top 10, top 5? And in this case, I'll be ranking them in terms of the top 20, starting off with number 20, of course, and then going to the podium at the very end. Like this video, subscribe to my channel, and also the notification bell so you're always up to date with my content, whether it's for FPL or UCL Fantasy, and videos and live streams will return very soon for the Champions League towards the end of August and going into September as well. Check all the links in the description for my Patreon and the championships, fair links to my videos, amongst many other perks. The Discord server, FPL League and Spotify can also be found in the description. Without further ado, let's jump straight into it. There is still no clarity on the future of Morgan Gibbs-White. It seemed like a deal to Tottenham Hotspur was all but done, but then it came out that Forest were going to file some legal complaints about the way Tottenham Hotspur approached a player, and that's why that deal has been put on hold. So let's see if Gibbs-White stays at Nottingham Forest or moves to Tottenham Hotspur. But either way, I think he's one of the best midfielders, as he demonstrated last season with 154 FPL points. And in terms of bonus, he could also be quite consistent. He was overshadowed by Chris Wood and some of the defenders at Forest, not to mention Matt Sells in goal. But Gibbs-White was very consistent with his 7 goals and 11 assists and 51 key passes. So the underlying stats won't be anything particularly amazing, but I think they'll be strong enough to be sustainable and provide enough returns until the end of the season, really. And if he does stay at Forest, the opening fixtures are good. Arsenal away in Game Week 4 looks quite tough, but I still think Forest can cause some problems there. And in the other matches, I think they can get a few victories on board and try to build upon the foundations laid last season. But in terms of the recent pre-season friendlies, they drew both games 0-0, and Gibbs-White came on as a substitute in the second match. He's a massive differential at 3.8% ownership, but I think a large part of that is because of the uncertainty we have in Forest this season with the departure of Anthony Elanga, and we all expect a drop-off. And then you couple that with Gibbs-White, whether he's going to stay at Forest or go to Tottenham Hotspur. I think that's the key reason why he's going to be such a massive differential come Game Week 1. Going on to number 19 though, I've ranked Bruno Guimaraes quite highly because I think he can combine a few goals and assists, and in this case he got 11 goal contributions last season with some defensive contributions as well, and I think he could easily get 150 plus FPL points, and he'll be crucial for Newcastle, especially if they sell Alexander Isak to either Liverpool or somewhere else. But he's an even bigger differential than Morgan Gibbs-White with 1.3% ownership and a cheaper price tag of 6.5 million. He also created 12 big chances, which is quite decent, and the opening 2 fixtures are very poor to say the least against Aston Villa and Liverpool, but it does get better for Newcastle afterwards. But I think generally speaking, if you look a bit longer term, their fixtures aren't the greatest compared to the likes of Liverpool, who have a nice fixture swing around Game Week 4. And Newcastle, despite the signing of Elanga, it looks like their transfer window is going downhill. They missed out on Trafford, who is set to join Manchester City, and of course Alexander Isak leaving would be a massive blow. If he somehow stayed, that would be a massive boost. Then adding a striker of real quality to kind of complement that. But at this moment in time, they might be in the market for 2 strikers. Benjamin Sesko has been heavily linked. The same goes for Visser from Brentford. Let's go on to the next option though in the midfield, and Enzo Fernandez was really impressive last season in the Premier League. He had some purple patches and he built upon this in the Club World Cup. He can also get some defensive contribution points, not to the same level as Moises Caicedo, for example, but he's going to get far more goal contributions in that Chelsea side, and he's even playing as an attacking midfielder nowadays with Palmer shifting to the right, and you've got Pedro Neto on the left, Joao Pedro up front, and Reece James takes Enzo Fernandez's place in central midfield alongside Moises Caicedo. But it does depend, because Chelsea won't always play that sort of system, because they've got Malo Gusto at right back as well. But sometimes you'll just see Reece James play at right back and then have Enzo Fernandez playing even deeper. But even in such scenarios, he can still get the odd goal contribution here and there and get some bonus points in the process. And Chelsea have the best fixtures of any team over the first 6 game weeks, which is something I've highlighted in my recent videos. And whilst he's not the best Chelsea attacker, that will go to Cole Palmer and Joao Pedro, I think Enzo Fernandez could rival them in terms of value, and he's arguably a better option than Pedro Neto at this moment in time. Declan Rice, though, comes in at 6.5 million as well. Another differential, although his ownership is still higher than the other options I've just discussed, at 7.6% ownership. With 4 goals and 7 assists last season, he can take corners, free kicks, and even score from them, as he showed against Real Madrid in the Champions League. 2 moments of magic, and if he can replicate that in the Premier League, he's going to become a very popular option over the next couple of months, with 17 big chance created, which is incredible for a player we always saw as a defensive midfielder with limited offensive threat during his time at West Ham. That has changed under Mikel Arteta and Arsenal, and his game has gone to another level. There's no denying that he's overshadowed by Bukayo Saka, but there's a massive difference in the price tags, and the signing of Viktor Gyökeres will be a game changer for Arsenal, and he'll be another one that people gravitate towards too. You've also got Saliba and Gabriel at the back, not to mention David Raya in goal. But Declan Rice can still be a solid option as your second or third Arsenal asset from time to time, and that could really bode well in future game weeks. He faces United away in game week 1, and he scored at Old Trafford only a couple of months ago. And I think he can be a really solid asset from now until the end of the season, and just be really consistent with defensive contributions in mind as well. Even if he's playing as a box-to-box left central midfielder, he's still going to get some defensive contribution points, and I could see him getting 150 plus overall with the goals, the assists, the set-piece threat, and the defensive contributions, which turns the likes of Rice, even Enzo Fernandez, Caicedo, Elliot Anderson, and multiple others into competent FPL choices, and you could actually choose them over more attacking wingers and midfielders, as I'm going to discuss very soon. Ismaila Sarr is one of them. He comes in at 6.5 million, which is arguably a little underpriced. He outscored Eze, for example, who is 1 million more expensive, but Ismaila Sarr is quite a streaky player, and most of his big returns came against Aston Villa, whether it was in the FA Cup semi-final or across both league games. He was absolutely amazing in all of those matches against the Villains, and we could see something similar in Game Week 3 when he faces Aston Villa away. And of course, I think those Villa fans will be very, very anxious about that meeting. Mitoma is another good choice, though, with better fixtures than Crystal Palace over the first 4 game weeks. Man City at home doesn't look great in Game Week 3, and Brighton's record against Pep Guardiola is quite poor. But Mitoma got 10 goals and 5 assists in the previous campaign, with 20 big chances and even better underlying stats compared to the previous campaign, with 145 points to show for it as well. And his ownership is quite low at 5.6%. You've got Danny Welbeck up front, who scored 4 goals in Brighton's first preseason game. Those two are the best Brighton attackers overall. And you've also got De Kuyper as the left wing back to replace Pervis Estupiñán. Those 3 would probably be the best Brighton assets in general, but Mitoma is still number 1 for me, and this price tag reflects good value in the midfield. Let's go on to number 14 now, in Ndai, who is also priced at 6.5 million. I think we've got a lot of good options at this price tag, but then if you look at those at 6 million or below, you could have some hidden gems like Reinders from Man City or Moises Caicedo, but generally speaking, you're going to be more inclined for the more attacking options like Ndai, who has been reclassified from a forward to a midfielder, and he's on penalties for Everton, although that could change with the signing of Tierno Barry, who will be discussed in future videos. But Everton have good opening fixtures, which I highlighted in my best goalkeepers and defenders podcast, and Ndai got 9 goals last season, but not a single assist, which is something he can definitely work on. 21 bonus points though shows the capability of his big returns, and it also goes to show he's the best Everton attacker by some distance. He got 114 FPL points last season, and I could see him reaching double digits in terms of goals, getting a few assists in the process, and just being an even better asset this season. With that reclassification, midfielders will always be better FPL assets than forwards with this scoring system. You get the extra point for scoring a goal and also for keeping a clean sheet. But we're not just limited to 6.5 million midfielders. We still have some good mid-priced options like Eze, who comes in at 7.5 million, and his ownership is 8.3%. He had a poor start to the last Premier League season, but he was constantly doing the business in the Carabao Cup and the FA Cup, where he scored the winning goal against Man City in the final, and he got 8 goals and 8 assists in the Premier League last season with 65 shots and 148 FPL points. Crystal Palace have some poor opening fixtures, but Eze is heavily linked with Arsenal, and he could play as their main left winger, if not in that left central midfield role at times, and maybe even compete with Martin Odegaard should that transfer go through. A lot of different sources have indicated that Arsenal are very willing to go there, and Eze's camp are also having that sort of feeling that Arsenal will get him in the end. So let's wait and see what happens with this particular transfer. But if Eze stays at Crystal Palace, he is still one of the best midfielders in Fantasy Premier League. He can do it from open play, set pieces, and he's got those moments of magic. He showed it in a recent preseason friendly. Not only did he score, but he dribbled past a few players and almost had an incredible chip end up in the back of the net. But I'm also going to discuss Semenyo, who is a bit cheaper than Eze at 7 million. His ownership is 5.5%, and the main reason why he's unpopular, so to speak, is because of Liverpool away in Game Week 1. But if the Reds defend the way they did against AC Milan, then they're going to have a few problems against Bournemouth, despite all the outgoings that the Cherries have had to endure in their defensive line. But we can't judge too much from pre-season. That's the way I look at it. You can notice a few patterns and trends and maybe spot a team that will be much better this season, but you can't say that Liverpool suddenly are absolute bums because they didn't play their full starting 11. Semenyo got 11 goals and 7 assists last season with 125 shots, which is simply incredible. And not only that, he delivered 165 FPL points, most of which were either on my bench or just after I sold him. But he's the type of player that's fixture proof, and you can't really just play him because he's got Wolves at home in Game Week 2. He might do better against Liverpool away than he does in the other fixtures. That's the type of player who he is, and over the years he has scored or assisted against the biggest clubs in the country. He got a double-digit haul against Man City last season at home. He scored at Anfield a few years ago, and he's done it against every single big club at this point. So he is a very consistent asset for Bournemouth, and at that price point, you simply can't complain. There is also Justin Kluivert, who is on penalties, priced at the exact same, but I do rank Semenyo higher this season, and I feel Kluivert could drop off a little bit, while Semenyo will be very consistent, and I also think the shot volume will always be in his favour, but he definitely needs to improve his accuracy. Sometimes he prioritises shot power over his precision, and once he can get that balance right, he can score even more goals next season. Kudus is also very interesting at 6.5 million, and there's a reason why he's so template. With 27.9% ownership, he only got 5 goals and 4 assists for West Ham last season in the Premier League alone, but he got 75 shots, 106 FPL points, and he did even better in his debut campaign for the Hammers. And at Spurs, I think he's going to be the main right winger and not have that sort of problem with Jared Bowen, where you've got 2 right wingers in the same team, so Kudus gets shifted to the left and he doesn't play his best football. I think there's going to be a massive improvement in Kudus, and that's why he ranks quite highly in this best midfielders list. And it's Burnley at home in Game Week 1, and Spurs have good opening fixtures actually for the first 12 game weeks, and even if you look a bit shorter term, they'll still rank quite highly in the FDR, which is essentially the fixture difficulty rating. Now, Burnley at home does take place 3 days after the UEFA Super Cup final against Paris Saint-Germain, but besides that, there isn't too much to kind of discredit with this Kudus pick. You've also got Solanke up front. I think he'll have a big season under Thomas Frank. They drew 2-2 against Wycombe Wanderers very recently, but the likes of Kudus didn't feature. He made a brief cameo against Reading and got an assist and took all the corners for Tottenham Hotspur. But if he can retain these duties in the upcoming Premier League season, he'll be an even better asset than I currently think he will be. But he narrowly misses out on the top 10, and instead I've opted for Morgan Rogers instead, who has a similar price tag at 7 million, and his ownership is also quite template at 21%. He delivered 8 goals and 11 fantasy assists last season, with 16 big chances created and over 10 big chances himself, delivering 161 FPL points overall. And despite facing Newcastle home in Game Week 1, Aston Villa have solid opening fixtures. They are top of the FDR for the opening 8 game weeks, and I do cover all the fixtures in recent podcasts, like the key changes to FPL video. So I think Rodgers is a very decent option to have as your 5th midfielder, and you can rotate him with several forwards or perhaps other options in the midfield, and he's arguably the best Aston Villa asset overall, despite the fact that Ollie Watkins could rival him for that particular title. In number 9, though, I've gone for Phil Foden, who had a poor campaign by his standards. He obviously won the Premier League Player of the Year the season beforehand when Man City lifted the Premier League title. It's Wolves away in Game Week 1. then Tottenham, Brighton, and Man United, and some of these fixtures are actually opponents that Foden does really well against, particularly Brighton and Man United, and he also delivered an assist against Wolves last season. With 7 goals and only 3 assists, it's quite poor overall, but the XGI was still 10.64 and the minutes were quite limited. The same goes for the starts, of course, and that's something that was also continued in the Club World Cup. Despite the fact that Foden had a positive tournament, scoring multiple goals off the bench, if he can get more starts and also build that confidence, I think Foden could easily be much higher than 9th on this list. But based on what he did last season and the lack of minutes, which is always a concern with most Man City players, I think Phil Foden is still a little bit lacking in terms of FPL credentials compared to some of the other options on this list. But that price tag of 8 million is quite appealing. The same goes for Wirtz and Mbeumo, who will no longer have penalties at Man United, but could Bruno Fernandes share some of them with Cunha and Mbeumo? It's certainly possible, and his record from the spot is incredible. He got 20 Premier League goals last season with 9 assists, 22 big chances, and every single underlying stat was very strong. 236 FPL points was also incredible. Only Mohamed Salah outscored him. I think it's very close between him and Cunha when you're ranking them, and Bruno Fernandes, but defensive contributions does come into play, the penalties as well, and whilst Wirtz and Mbeumo has a chance of taking those penalty kick duties from Bruno Fernandes, I still think that won't be a guarantee from Game Week 1, and Man United have poor opening fixtures, with the exception of Burnley at home in Game Week 3. I'm also going to go for another Man City midfielder in Marmoush, who was recently reclassified from a forward to a midfielder, and his minutes could also be a slight concern, but I would expect him to start 30 plus Premier League games. He can play on the right as a second striker or even down the middle when Erling Haaland misses out. He got 7 goals and 1 assist since signing for Man City back in January, and before that even happened for Frankfurt, he was second in Europe's top 5 leagues in terms of goal contributions, only behind Mohamed Salah. He got 49 shots, which is quite healthy actually, considering the game time he got in a Man City shirt, and 73 FPL points is still a decent return, but I think there's much more to come from Marmoush. He can easily get 160 plus FPL points this season, and his ownership is 16%, but I feel he's becoming less popular as time goes on. He was recently at around 18-19% ownership, but I think there are other options in the midfield that could rival him or even better him, especially in terms of the minutes. He comes in with that 8.5 million price tag. Even Phil Foden, for example, is cheaper. But another Man United midfielder somehow makes his way into this team. But I feel they've made some good signings in Cunha and Mbeumo, and it's difficult to say that Cunha is a better asset than Mbeumo. That wasn't the case last season, despite the fact that Cunha was a bonus points machine with 41, which was the exact same as Chris Wood, and Matheus Cunha missed multiple games through suspension, and that's one of the main concerns I have about him at Man United. His disciplinary record is questionable, and we saw that come to the surface last season, but he's going to get a lot of FPL points, and he's also used to that sort of system that Ruben Amorim likes to play, the 3-4-2-1, playing on the left-hand side as an inside forward. So I think Cunha could easily adapt to his new settings at Man United and get some big returns, even against difficult opponents like Arsenal and Man City in the opening 4 game weeks. We're now getting very close to the best options overall. Bruno Fernandes comes in at number 5 with 8 goals and 12 assists last season, and he had a pretty poor start, but I think in 2025 he has been one of the best midfielders in the Premier League with 91 key passes, 174 FPL points. The penalty duties are also there, and his ownership is quite low, I think, because that increase in the price tag to 9 million is also to do with defensive contributions. Fernandes will get points from that, so don't be surprised if he gets 200 plus FPL points overall, with defensive contributions playing a big part in that. And the fixtures aren't great, but Fernandes scored against Arsenal last season at Old Trafford, and he's going to be a great captaincy option in certain game weeks, but it's difficult to make that case when you've got Erling Haaland and Mohamed Salah roaming the Premier League. But Bruno Fernandes is still one of the best FPL assets since he joined from Sporting a few years ago, and despite the fact he hasn't really reached those heights in terms of goals and assists as he once did, you're still going to get healthy returns every single season, and the chance creation is simply ridiculous. I do rank him higher over Mbeumo and Matheus Cunha, despite being priced at 1 million more, which is obviously going to put a lot of people off, but I think he can easily outscore both of them, and the penalties are also a huge factor in that sort of decision. But in 4th, I'm going for the new signing Florian Wirtz, who played as a striker against AC Milan, but he didn't really do anything in that particular match. It was a bit of an off game for him and Mohamed Salah, but he did get a few assists in a recent friendly with 10 goals and 13 assists in the Bundesliga last season. He was also solid in UCL Fantasy, delivering 6 goals, which is the same as Viktor Gyökeres from Sporting, and he got 31 goal contributions across all competitions. The ownership is very high at 37.4%, and I think this will go even higher before Game Week 1 even begins, because that price tag is a little bit too low in my opinion. He easily could have been 9.5 million or above, and Liverpool have a tricky start in the opening 3 game weeks on paper, but I think Bournemouth could be a better fixture than some people think. I mean, it really depends on how both teams approach it, and Bournemouth might still be quite underrated overall, but in terms of the attack that Liverpool have up against that Bournemouth defence, I think that could be a bit of a mismatch. Otherwise, Bournemouth can still cause problems of their own with their attackers and also the creativity they have to offer. Areola is still a good coach, of course, but Wirtz is one of the best midfielders in FPL, and I could see him rivaling the likes of Saka, Palmer, and Salah, not to mention the others covered on this list. But at number 3, I am going for Bukayo Saka. It's a very close one here. He got 6 goals and 14 assists last season with 21 big chance created and 127 FPL points, but he missed a lot of months due to injury, and that played a big part. Otherwise, he was almost guaranteed to get 200 plus once again, and he was also on course for breaking the all-time assist record, you could say, because he got the vast majority of these assists in the first half of the season, but then got that unfortunate injury against Crystal Palace back in December. But he has bounced back fairly well, and he scored against AC Milan in Arsenal's second friendly, a 1-0 victory for them, and they did play a behind closed doors friendly against Watford, where the likes of Havertz and Ben White scored. But Saka, I think, will be very consistent. The goals is something he can always improve on, and he hasn't even reached 15 Premier League goals yet or scored a hat-trick, but those things I think could come over time. And the signing of Viktor Gyökeres, I can't stress it enough, that could be an absolute game changer for Arsenal, and Saka could get even more assists and also get a few more goals as he has more space to operate in on the right-hand side. But Arsenal have very tricky fixtures. Leeds at home is the standout in Game Week 2, so if you do free hit there, doubling or tripling up on Arsenal would be a great play. But besides that, you'd want only 1, maybe 2 Arsenal players max when they face Man United, Liverpool, Nottingham Forest, Newcastle, and Man City in the opening 6 game weeks. At number 2, it is Cole Palmer. I think he is a close second, you could say, but Salah last season was just on another level, and Palmer did drop a lot in 2025, but we saw the best of him in the Club World Cup, particularly in the knockout stages. He got 2 assists against Benfica, he scored against Palmeiras, and he also delivered in the final against Paris Saint-Germain. He got a massive return, and he was my captain in the end because I used that chip. It was all covered, of course, in my Club World Cup fantasy content. His ownership has gone above 50% right now, with 15 goals and 10 fantasy assists. Those are still incredible numbers for a player of his age, and despite that kind of lack of form in the last few months of the season, and he created 25 big chances. All the stats are incredible for Palmer, and they will be discussed in future videos as well. He once again got to over 200 FPL points. I think he'll do the same again this season. Let me know down in the comment section below if you think Palmer could become number 1 in FPL at some point. Mohamed Salah, of course, is in his 30s, and you are looking at the kind of next Salah in FPL, taking the mantle as the best FPL player, especially in the midfield, and Palmer is definitely one of the front runners in that regard. He's got the penalties, he can score from open play, provide assists, and the shot volume, chance creation, all of that is sustainable, and he is the talismanic figure for Chelsea. That won't change with the signing of Joao Pedro. If anything, it will only improve him as an FPL asset, as we saw in the Club World Cup. But at number 1, it is Mohamed Salah. He looked quite poor against AC Milan, but it's just one preseason game, and I think he'll start Game Week 1 on fire. He's got a great record in opening fixtures in the Premier League, and I have discussed that recently. 7 double-digit hauls, 10 goals, 8 assists, just incredible numbers all round, and that's why he's the front runner for the captaincy against Bournemouth at home. Even against Newcastle and Arsenal, he can be captain, and you'll get a nice return in those matches. And Burnley away is actually consideration for the triple captaincy, as we now get 2 triple captains, bench boosts, wildcards, and also free hits, 1 for each half of the season. And I think Salah would be one of the standouts and someone you want to focus on with your chip strategies. And if you want to see a respective chip strategy video, then let me know down in the comment section below. But 29 goals, 18 assists, 119 shots inside the box, 344 FPL points, which is a record. These are outstanding numbers, which will be very difficult to replicate, and records are there to be broken, but I think it might take a few years for these numbers to be bettered. And he also set the all-time record for most goal contributions in a single season. His ownership is incredibly high at 57.6%, and he's the clear standout over Erling Haaland, who only has around 18% ownership at this moment in time, but there is a good reason for that. And Salah coming in at 14.5 million might seem a little low for some people, but I think him missing a few games due to AFCON does play a little part in his pricing. And of course, AFCON transfers aren't the most popular of new features in FPL this season, but Salah remains at number one, and it'll be interesting to see how we navigate that sort of period at AFCON and who we replace him with. But Palmer would be one of the standouts there, and Bukayo Saka would also lead the pack, and that would complete my top 3. And not just that, I also talked about the top 20 midfielders in FPL, but there are more things to cover, like summer signings, those from newly promoted clubs, and also differentials, budget picks. If you want to see those videos, let me know down in the comment section below. With the best midfielders, defenders and goalkeepers in FPL all discussed, there is still a lot more to talk about, and the forwards is up next. I'll also be making more drafts, delving into a few other intricacies of FPL, so you've got the full coverage ahead of Game Week 1 and you're well prepared for the upcoming season. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it insightful, then like this video, subscribe to my channel, and also the notification bell so you're always up to date with my content, whether it's for FPL or UCL Fantasy, and we're closing in on 34 subscribers. Follow me on X, Instagram and Blue Sky, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description for my Patreon and the Championships, for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks. The Discord server, FPL League and Spotify can also be found in the description. I'll see you very soon for even more FPL content, and keep your eyes peeled for the Game Week 1 deadline stream.